Okay, so I'm not sure if you heard that or if I cut off here, but the cross grain cut is why I want to start with that first, because I'm going to remove this section of the rabbets on this second round. And so if I did a reverse, that tear out could show up on the face of the door. So trying to avoid all that. All right, so let me make this last cut, and then I'll talk to you about strategy a little bit, and then we can get back to door making. Okay, so a couple of things. This actually turned out pretty well. This is the worst of them. So there is a little bit of a separation here where my first and second cuts were made. Let me zoom in, guys. Yay. All right. So you can see that the cross grain cut was a little bit lower than the ripping cut. And so the rest of them look good. This one is just a touch off, which I have found is fairly common. And I don't really know why, but it drives me crazy. So there's a little bit of tweaking and adjusting to do after the fact. This is a very simple correction with a shoulder plane. If I were to bring that in here and then just kind of fare these out, that's great. But ideally you should be able to come away from this cut on the table saw without any problems, and it should fit nicely. Alright, so a couple things that I wanted to go over and talk about for process here. I have, when measuring these things out, still a little thick on that one. When I cut this panel, I intentionally undersized the width. So I know that this is going to expand and contract. Right now it's December, or nearly December. So I know that come July, August, this thing is going to be at its maximum width. So if I don't trim any excess material off of the edges first, before I cut the rabbet, then I know that it's going to start to expand and start to compromise or break these joints away. Never underestimate the force that the wood expansion has. You know, I remember being in Egypt and taking a tour about how in a time before steel tools were created, how these Egyptians would create obelisks and other stone forms. And it was really interesting because they would talk about, I'm getting off topic, but this will come back, bear with me. They talked about finding a fissure in the stone when it's still on the ground, and then jamming it with wooden wedges or shims, and then they would just basically soak it with water, and then the water would cause the wood to expand, and then it would create a larger and larger fissure, and anyway, eventually it would just pop that stone out of the earth. So I say that because now if I do make this tight, the expansion is going to be crazy, and it's going to start to pop these things apart, and doors are easy enough to remake, but having to have that awkward conversation with your client, hey, your door's broken, come fix it, that's just something that could easily be avoided, and now is the time and the place to do it. So anyway, this is my thinking here. The width I have trimmed down a bit for allowing for the room to move. Now I haven't done that on the length because there's really no appreciable movement there. And I also like the idea of the top and the bottom of the rabbet holding this door into a rigid structure. If anything else fails with the joinery here, if there's any kind of trauma, maybe this piece of furniture is going to fall when your clients or the new owners are going to be moving it around. They'll do maybe some damage to the corners of the door, but the whole door won't be compromised and it won't break. And that's because it's going to have this rigid structure on the interior as well as the joinery to hold it into place. So thoughts there. Just flipping this around. I can't move this top and bottom much. There's a little bit of wiggle, but side to side you can see that I've got enough movement that this will expand easily. And I think I removed about 1/8 of an inch total from where it needs to be. Yeah, so that's the process there. I'm going to do a little bit of fitting of these rabbets and just make sure it goes in easily. The shoulder planes, what I'm going to be doing to kind of tweak and adjust those, but for the most part, the majority of the work is done. What I do want to talk about is next steps after the fitting happens, and then before I glue it up. So gluing these things up is going to be kind of a critical piece to understand. Because of the movement of this panel, I can't glue anywhere on these edges. If I glue this edge and this edge, it has no room to move or expand, so that becomes an issue. And the wood's still going to move, it's just going to bring the frame with it. And so what I want to do is I only want to put a spot of glue top and bottom. So because of that, I'm going to put a little piece of glue tape here and here, and I'll do that top as well. And the reason for this is I need to apply finish on this panel before I glue it up. If I don't finish this thing first, once this door shrinks, it's going to expose a shadow that is unfinished, and so you have to finish the whole thing, including the rabbit, before this thing gets glued up. If I don't tape this thing off, then I lose the ability to, when I'm gluing the joints of the frame up, I also want to put a spot of glue right in the center on the back and the front of this door. Once that gets glued together, that will anchor this into position. If I don't glue this at all, then it could slide laterally, and what I'm going to try to do is when this gets glued up, I'm going to have a little bit of a gap all the way around the panel. I want to make sure that that's centered. Don't have to worry about top and bottom, but side to side, I definitely want to look to make sure that shadow is consistent. So anyway, so that's what I'm going to do. So fine tune these joints, and then apply finish, and then I'll be ready to glue this thing up. I'm not going to finish the door yet, or the frame yet. I'll probably wait to do that until after. I could pre-finish, but I would have to tape off the tenon area, and that's an option. But for me, I just think it's easier to finish the whole thing once it's assembled, with the exception of the panel. The panel always has to be first. Alright, hopefully that was not confusing. I will break away and do that and catch up with you when it comes time to gluing up.